Good morning. Let's see, we are in Matthew chapter 22, and we'll be starting in verse 41. Looks like we're finishing up the chapter. While the Pharisees were gathered together, it literally means like to huddle, have a little plotting session. Jesus asked them, saying, "What do you think about the Christ? Whose son is he?" They said to him, "The son of David." He said to them, "How then does David in the Spirit call him Lord, saying, 'The Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand till I make your enemies your footstool'? If David then calls him Lord, how is he his son?" No one is able to answer him a word, nor from that day on did anyone dare question him anymore. And so really, we're going to find Jesus's final teachings. And although it takes a few more chapters to get up to that point, we're going to watch and see Jesus's final teachings leading up to his crucifixion. So at this point, they're done asking him all these questions. But Hebrews 1, just a similar section of text, and it's making a case, and it is referring back to all of this. Let's see. I'm way off here. There we go. Hebrews chapter 1, verses 8 and 9. But to the Son, he, and it's speaking of the Father, says, "Your throne, O God, is forever and ever. A scepter of righteousness is the scepter of your kingdom. You have loved righteousness and hated lawlessness. Therefore God, your God, has anointed you with the oil of gladness more than your companions." And so what we find here is again this concept of how can the Son of David also be David's Lord? And then over here in Hebrews, how can God call the Son God if unless he is God? Jesus was trying to lead the Pharisees up to this, where he liked asking them questions because it left them to come up with the conclusions. It left them to have to think it through. And rather than Jesus just boldly coming out and making statements, he used the Socratic method. Maybe it'd be more correct to say that Socrates used the Jesus method, because Jesus was around first. At least I'm pretty sure. No, wait, Socrates was before. I'm off on my timeline, am I? Socratic method. Socrates was before Jesus. Because it was in the time when the Greeks were reigning, and this is when Rome was already taken over. So it'd be before Jesus. Got that one wrong momentarily there. Well, Socrates was still using the Jesus method. I'll still stick with that. So either way, we have these verses that point to the deity of Christ, that Jesus is God in the flesh. And this is of the utmost importance. At the end of the day, what separates the churches from the cults quite often comes down to the person of Christ and of God, right? As we get down to it, it is, who is Jesus? Now, I'm going to take what might be considered a more gracious, maybe it's not gracious, maybe it's foolish, but there are people who are confused about how the Trinity works. They're confused about the idea of a triune. There's modalism where the Father turns into the Son and the Son turns into the Spirit. they use the word is manifested. It's the same God manifested three different ways, but they don't see the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit as three distinct persons. And all that said, I don't get to call the shots. Only God does. But part of me wants to be hopeful that this confusion over how does God appear in Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, how does that all work? When churches are confused about that, or Christians are confused about that, and have some slightly off doctrines, I pray that they're not damning. There are many who would quickly say they are, and I'll let other people make the final call on that, preferably God. But when we start describing now something I think a bit further from that, when we begin to deny the deity of Christ, now we're moving into a new territory. See, the modalists, they would teach that, the Father became the Son became the Holy Spirit, and they're all God, though. They got that part figured out. Where others will deny the deity of Jesus, that Jesus isn't God, that he was just a good man, perhaps, some say, is a good man whom God gave the power of his Spirit upon. That's how he lived a sinless life. And, he was the Messiah, the chosen one, but he was only a man. There's the old saying that if I come up and slap you, it's you that I have to apologize to, and you that I have to seek forgiveness from. I can't apologize to your friend or seek forgiveness from your uncle. It's you I have offended, and therefore you I must deal with. Well, we have sinned against God, and that's why God had to come and die on the cross, because it had to be made right between us and them, and no third party could do it. It had to be the offended person coming and saying, I'm going to make this settled. Someone else can't settle the debt, but God can settle his own debt. And so we see that. We also see in the cults, now diving further, people who call Jesus totally other things. It is taught by the Jehovah's Witnesses that Jesus is the Archangel Michael incarnate. It's taught by the Mormons that Jesus is like Heavenly Father's first son born, and he was right there next to Lucifer, his brother, another son born. And he's just one of God's creations, just like all of us, actually. And he did hold a significant role to the Mormons, but he was just another created being. And one day we'll all be just like Jesus too, if we're good Mormons. That's what they teach. And so at the end of the day, you see, it doesn't matter if people say the name Jesus. If you live in the lower valley, there's a lot of people named Jesus around here, right? Just because someone has the same name, and even if you call them the Christ, we need to make sure we're talking about the same person. I think this is where things can get distinctly wrong and different, where if I'm describing someone to you and I describe them totally different from the way we know they are, well, then maybe we're not talking about the same person. Especially when someone's very firm about it. Not like, oh, I might be mistaken, but like, no, this is who he is. And so Jesus was trying to get the Pharisees to chew on who is the Christ, who is the Messiah, who is he supposed to be. And if David calls his son his Lord, that must be hinting at something. Because in their culture specifically, you would never call your son Lord. So how can it be? And so Jesus brings this up because he's trying to get the Pharisees to rethink their misconception on who the Messiah was supposed to be. And it's something that some of our friends and maybe your family, if they're caught up in these cults and some of these more fringe groups of the church where they've got some things wrong about who Jesus is. And this is a subject that can be life or death. This is a subject that can be heaven or hell. I don't think any Christian who's responded to the gospel and is desiring to know God is going to be in any danger because they don't understand things. But when we have people who are firmly holding to doctrine and teaching of a very different Jesus, when you put them side by side and you line up the points, they're obviously different people. This is why I'm very adamant, that Mormons aren't Christians, though they want to be called that. And if they get to be called that, then I'm not a Christian, and I'll just go by some other title. I really don't care about what title I'm called by. But the catch is that we believe in a different Christ. They have their Jesus, and we have ours. Even their own president, former president, Hinckley, he commented that they worship a different Jesus than we do. So it's worth us all knowing that. So, who is Jesus? It's a big deal. Who is God the Father? Who is the Holy Spirit? Who are the three heads of the Trinity, the three parts? And so, you not fully understanding, that's okay. You firmly understanding something different from what the Bible teaches, that's a bad place to be. So, doctrine matters. What we believe does really matter, and it really does affect typically just our effectiveness at our ministry and our sanctification. But this is a make it or break it. And so hopefully we as Christians do understand this is what separates us from the false religions, the false Christian religions that are out there. All right. If today was a downer, thankfully tomorrow we can start the woe to the scribes and Pharisees chapter. It's a pretty heavy one. So it's a good parallel for some of the stuff in Isaiah we're going to be covering this Sunday too. There's more woes in Isaiah. So, hey, God bless you guys. Have an amazing day, and I will see you guys tomorrow morning. Adios.